Today we're working on a 2006 Ford Expedition. We're going to be replacing the front inner tie rods. For ease of access, you can turn the steering wheel out so we can get better access to this outer tie rod, and then open this up to get the inner tie rod. So first what we'll do is remove this. This is a 21 millimeter. Before we take this nut off, first thing we want to do actually is crack this nut, and it's a 24 millimeter. So you just want to break that loose first while it's held in place. Once that's loose, now we can go ahead and pull this nut off and get the outer tie rod off the knuckle. Just a tip, when you're taking this off, sometimes this shaft likes to just spin in its little socket. So what you can do, it has a hex head for a wrench to hold it, or if you're using a power tool in a socket, you could take a pry bar, put it under here, and then pry up, and that'll wedge it into into the steering knuckle and prevent it from spinning. Once you get that nut off, sometimes you just tap on here. You can see it's a cone-shaped taper. Sometimes that taper will get just stuck in its little hole. So just some vibration, tapping it will make it fall out, and then wiggle the steering knuckle around, and then it'll drop out. When removing the outer tie rod off the inner tie rod, it just spins off. If it becomes hard, you can hold, there's a place to put a wrench here. It's a 15 millimeter. You can hold this in place while you spin this out. What you will want to do, just so you can it'll get aligned after everything's put together, but to get it close to where it needs to be, you count how many turns it took to get it off the inner tie rod, and that's roughly about how many turns it'll take to get it pretty close to where it was originally. Now that that's off, we can go ahead and take this nut all the way off. So to take this nut off, it may be pretty hard. What you could do is just take your 15 millimeter, hold it there, and then if you have a wrench, you can wrench it off, or if you have power tools, it's a 24 mil deep socket, will get it off as well. So next we want to take this boot off. It has a clamp right here. Just a pair of pliers will get that off. You want to save this little clip. You want to save this clip here. We'll reinstall it. And then on the inside, let me see if I can show you. You see this nub right here. That's for the inner clamp. And they're not reusable, so you can just take a screwdriver. This is just a pry bar, and beat on it, and it'll just separate. Now this whole boot, you just pull on. Well, this one's kind of stuck, but the idea is you just pull on it and it'll come off. Pull that out. Mamma mia! There we go. And then it separates from that steering rack. And then this is the same. You just pull on it and the whole boot will slide off. There, just like that. Sometimes what will happen is this boot end here will turn inside out. That's okay, don't worry about it. You can, when you put it back on, the inner tie rod end here will push it back right side. Or before installation, you could just take something and put it through that end to push it back out. But that's how it should be, is like this. So now we want to get this off, and this is a 42 millimeter. If you have a wrench, that'll work. If you have a crow's foot, 42 mil, or you can get these. Let me put it on the ground. You can get these tools from your local auto parts store. You can rent them. It's just an inner tie rod removal tool, and they come with a whole set of crow's feet. So then what you do is you just slide it in here, and that's it. And then you can, with a well, I'll show you, but with a breaker bar, you put it on the end here, and then you just crack it loose. And then now it'll just come off. And that's it. So that's removal. Installation is in reverse. We'll go ahead and do that together. Before installation, you just want to line both parts up, make sure that the new one matches the old one. And then we'll also take this nut off here. Usually when you buy a new one, the nut's screwed onto the tie rod. So we'll just take that off. So then it's just a bare shaft. You can go ahead and thread on the new inner tie rod. There we go. That gets torqued down to 74 foot-pounds. Once that's torqued down, we can go ahead and slide the boot back on. Now you can see there's this notch here. So this will want to rest in the notch. So we'll just make sure. So if you went past the notch, then we just want to bring it back. So once that's in place, we can go ahead and put this clip back on. And then for the inner part, because we can't reuse that metal one, we'll just go ahead and put a really hefty zip tie right there and snug it down really good. That's enough to hold this inner boot on. Now that the boot's in place, the clamps are back on, we can thread on our outer tie rod. If you're replacing the inner tie rod, because the outer tie rod has to come off anyway, and if you suspect that your outer tie rods, they're old, maybe worn out too, go ahead and replace them as well. Because you're here, it's the perfect advantage for preventative maintenance. Even if they're not loose, if they're years old, preventative maintenance, you're already here. So putting it on, we want to count how many times that it took when we took it off, and then we'll tighten this nut down. Because it's getting aligned, you could just snug this. Technically it's 74 foot-pounds, but because this has to be cracked loose again at the alignment shop, just good and snug is fine. Now that this is on, we can go ahead and put it back on the steering knuckle. Now in the service manual, this is a lock nut, has a little nylon washer on top. Ford recommends replacing these when you take this off. The parts guy at Ford said that if you're going to reuse this, go ahead and use blue Loctite on the threads, and that's okay. Ford says that's an acceptable substitute. So you can replace this or use blue Loctite if you're not replacing it. So we'll go ahead and put this on, and then we'll tighten it down to 111 foot-pounds. Once that's tight, make sure that's snug with a wrench, double check your work, and you're finished. You put the tire back on and drive down to your local alignment shop and get it aligned. Good to go. All right, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.